it. Everyone's kind of traveling different events, so I'm gonna stand in for them today and see if we can move forward with our agenda briefing for August the 3rd, 2020. Not August 3rd, but the 31st. My fault. Getting ahead. And we're gonna do our consent agenda. I don't think we're gonna have any speakers. I know we have public comment on the first Monday, August the 3rd, but we're gonna start with our consent agenda and want to look at it, all of them. Look at the ones 3A through 5 through 5J. I'm sorry. Should be 3A through 5. Let's look at 3A through 4E. Oh, sorry about that. Adjustment to the agenda. Did everyone get the adjustment for the agenda? For consent agenda 3A, add on, and the regular agenda. We're going to do an amendment for 5J for contract amount was needed to be corrected. It was sent out, so we will start now with our consent agenda. 4A through 4F. Is there any questions on that? Anyone have any questions? 4A through 4F. Hearing none, we'll go into our next set of consent agendas, 4G through 4K. Hearing none, we will go to our next set of 4I through 4P. Is there any questions from anyone on those consent items? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next set would be 4Q through 4U. Any questions from anyone or any concern about any of those consent items? Hearing none, we'll go to the next set of consent, 4V through 4Y. Any questions or concern about any of those items? Hearing none, we'll go to our next set, would be 4Z through 4AD. Any question on those? Next, we will go into to our 5A, which would be our regular agenda.
Commissioner Houston, can I make one comment quickly?
Yes, sir.
Since it was added on, I kind of feel like I ought to explain a little bit. The adjustments to the agenda is 4AE, and that is to consider authorizing town manager to enter into a contract with Iredell County to allow for reimbursement in the amount of up to $984,000 and change for allowable related COVID-19 expenditures. So this is the second round of CARES Act funding that came through, and the first round we had a contract for. The second round changed a little bit, and you can see that we spent about 119,000. So we've got to look at what we're going to spend future funds on. But these are all reimbursement from CARES Act. So, you know, all the new PPE, the air scrubbers, all the things that we need like that. And one thing I want to throw out that we have talked about a little bit for consideration is the possibility of doing some assistance with utilities. We can actually work to expand the work that we do to help folks that have suffered from unemployment that can't pay their water and sewer bills. We could actually use some of these funds through the Christian Mission to help folks. So we're looking at all those options, but the contract needs to be signed. But we really don't have a you know, complete plan for 984,000 is what I wanted to kind of get across.
Anyone have any questions for Randy about this consent item? AE? Well, hearing none, we will go into our regular agenda, 5A.
Morning.
Good morning.
So this item is straight rezoning for 12 point, well, I should say part of 12.75 acre property. The property is currently split zoned, general industrial and single family residential. The applicant wishes to go just to general industrial. Slide, please. So you can see the R2 to the north and the GI to the south. The applicant wants to go all GI. So you can see 85% of it is GI and just wants to make it one zoning district. He has not conveyed any plans to staff as far as any intention to develop the property at this time and was trying to clean up the zoning before coming up with some plans. You can see the by right uses in GI, of course, it's industrial, so it's designed for industrial uses, manufacturing, storage, warehousing, those sorts of things. Next slide, please. The R2 district, of course, is our lowest density residential district, designed for single family homes, manufactured homes, and things like that. It's 2 units an acre. Next slide, please. Future land use designation does show this property as neighborhood residential. This property in particular, and just to the east of this, on Haney is a concrete plant. So staff wants to take a broader look at our future land use map because we don't feel that it's appropriate. The concrete plant and some other properties nearby to be neighborhood residential in the future land use. So we wanted to take a broader look at this area of the future land use map to see why it is showing the way it is. Next slide, please. So of course, we've looked at neighborhood residential in the past. You know, it's 3 to 6 units an acre, designed for residential use, some very limited multifamily potential as well. Next slide, please. So assuming approval, next steps for this applicant would be working with staff on a concept plan. It is not within the town corporate limits, so they would need to look at utility extension requests, annexation requests, of course, land disturbance permitting and building permitting from the county. Next slide, please. So during planning board, we had one citizen speak against the project. They live in the neighborhood just to the south. But if you recall the zoning map, the southern 85% of the property is already industrial. It's the northern tip that is not. Staff did recommend approval to the planning board. And as I mentioned, we also said with that recommendation that we wanted to evaluate the future land use map for that area, not just this one parcel. Planning board did recommend approval of through a 5-to-1 vote. You know, answer any questions.
Thank you, Danny. Does the board have any questions for Danny on Mr. Wilson on this agenda item?
Commissioner Houston, I have more a statement than a question.
Mr. West, go ahead.
Thank you. And Mr. Wilson, as you had mentioned, looking at that in a concrete plant, the only call out that I have is based on future development. We've got a situation where we've got a residential butted up against general industrial, and that's been some challenges for us with the Mooresville Business Park and Cherry Grove and Northbridge subdivision. So just to call out, Mr. Wilson, when we're looking at future development and whatever gets annexed in and how that does look in our future plans, that we just be mindful that, again, we're butting up a general industrial to residential area.
Thank you, Mr. West. Any other questions, clarity we need on this rezoning? Thanks, everyone. Hearing none, we'll go to agenda item 5B. Mr. Wilson?
Yes, sir. This is another straight rezoning request for 6.16 acres on Brawley School Road. And it's 459 Brawley School Road. The applicant wishes to go from R2 to corridor mixed use. You can see where it is there in town. Next slide, please. So currently there's just a single home on the property. You see to the northwest, that development is the Lowe's Food Shopping Center. So this property is just south of that and just a little bit to the east. It is currently single family residential with a pretty large open field. Next slide, please. I should mention this one is also in the ETJ and not within town limits. So as I mentioned, currently it's R2. It is in the Brawley School Road overlay, which just requires some buffering along Brawley School. You're familiar with the R2 district as far as single family home, the goal with two units an acre. Slide, please. A future land use map does show this as mixed use corridor, which recommends a mixture of retail, office, commercial, multifamily development. Really looking at mixed use development between 4 and 16 units an acre. Slide, please. So the mixed use corridor, you can see some of the character items in here and some of the desired 2 to 4 stories stepping back from residential areas. Really looking at mixed use and commercial development. Next slide, please. So again, assuming approval, the next steps would be concept plan with staff, and it would need to come before the board again for utility extension requests, annexation requests, land disturbance permits from the county, and building permitting from the county before they could do anything. Next slide, please. So during the planning board meeting, we had no citizens speak for or against this project. Staff did recommend approval. The project rezoning request is consistent with the One Mooresville plan. Staff felt it is compatible with the surrounding area and commercial uses in that corridor. The planning board did recommend approval through a 6-0 vote. Happy to answer any questions about this one.
Is there any more information we need or anything else that we'd like to talk about?
Commissioner Houston, if I may, please.
Mr. Compton, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Just another comment as from the last one. I think this is maybe the first of many to come along that corridor. I'm really surprised that someone's coming along at this later date than I thought to develop something or to change something, to rezone something between Williamson's Chapel United Methodist and Rolling Hill Road. That area is just wide open and somewhat owned by the same family, both sides of the road, a good bit of both sides of the road. So I think it's just the beginning of what we're going to see, perhaps with some type of commercial development all through that corridor. So I just want to make that comment for us to be mindful and be aware of what the future holds. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else have any? Sir.
Commissioner Houston,
Yes,
can I ask a question?
Portia. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. Danny, quick question for you. The driveway permits along that area, do we know, if I remember correctly, I think what driveways are there are going to be the only ones really allowed. So for this particular request, there's not going to be an additional driveway cut permitted by the DOT. Do you know?
I do not. We do not have a plan for this property. The applicant wishes to use the existing home for a medical office. but has not expressed any thoughts on, to us at least, on how the rest of the property would look, because it is just over 6 acres. There's plenty of room for potential development. But we have not talked any specifics as far as how this property would be developed or access onto Brawley School Road. It is, as you know, the divided median is there, so it would be a right in, right out, no matter how they did it, but I do not know about driveway spacing along this
Okay.
stretch.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else have anything else they'd like to get some information on before we move to our next agenda item? Hearing none, we'll go with you again, Mr. Wilson. 5C.
Yes, sir. So this is the text amendment we've talked about a couple times. This is applicant driven to allow electric fencing in the town. Currently, electric fencing is only allowed for agricultural or governmental use. It is not allowed for private businesses to use. And the applicant, in this case, owns a self-storage business and wants to have security fencing that is electrified. So this applicant put forth language that staff did not feel was enforceable and was not comfortable with having in the zoning ordinance, and conveyed that to planning board. When it came to planning board remanded the text amendment back to staff, addressing some new language that we felt would be enforceable and more practical to have in the ordinance. So this is the language drafted by staff for planning board direction. And the intent is to provide a security option for businesses while maintaining desired character in the area. It does require 4 changes to the zoning ordinance, as you see up on your screen. So 2.3.3, the first section clarifies that non-electrified fences do not need a zoning permit. The second section, 9.3.6.2, allows them above ground electrified fences to be allowed. 9.3.2 is really the meat of it, where the standards are, and that allows electrified fences through a conditional use permit. And then table 5.4.2 adds electrified fences to our table of permitted accessory uses. You can see some images in this slideshow of what they could look like. The electrified fences could be 2 feet higher than the fence in front of it. It does require to have a fence in front of it, between 4 and 12 inches away from the electrified fence. There would be a double fence. The outside fence would be more attractive and screen the electrified fence, but you will be able to see the electrified fence sticking up. Next slide, please. I think I already went over this, but again, you can see, so these are some images of some electrified fences that would follow this text amendment. Next slide, please. Same. You can see the electrified fence up top, prevent people from getting through. So staff did feel a conditional use permit would allow the board some flexibility in ensuring the character of the community was retained. It is only for non-residential properties in the highway business, the general industrial, and the exclusive industrial districts. So it is very specific on where it could be. It does, as I mentioned, require a secondary fence in front of it. If it's within 150 feet of a place where children gather, it would require that front fence to be impenetrable to small hands and arms, so kids couldn't accidentally reach up and grab an electrified fence, and has some other standards in there as well. And during the planning board meeting, the original applicant felt that the standards were too stringent. They wanted it to be staff level approval. They wanted to have more flexibility and not require the full screen front fence within 150 feet of areas where children assemble. They also did not want us to require building permitting, which we do in this text. We require an electric permit to be pulled from the county to ensure all building permitting standards are being followed. So staff did recommend approval of this text amendment. We do feel it is enforceable. I just want to make sure it's clear, this is not staff driven, this is applicant driven. Even though this language was modified by staff to be enforceable, we feel like it could provide a good security option for businesses, and it would have limited impact on the character of the community. So staff is comfortable in those realms, but this is not a staff request. I just want to make sure that's explicit The planning board did vote to approve through a 6-0 vote. Be happy to answer any questions about this.
Any questions from any of the members, present, board? Danny, I guess I'll comment on that. This is kind of one of those text amendments that we're looking forward. We're looking forward before we get a big surplus of things coming in. We'll have it all already established. And we are moving more to high-tech business and stuff. And I think this security give a lot of more pack for these new companies coming in. So I really think it maybe it's a good text that we're ahead of the game before we get more requests like this one. So I appreciate your hard work. And if anyone else have any comments or concern on the item on hand?
Commissioner Houston, sir, if I may.
Mr. Compton, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, when this was first brought up, we've talked about it kind of just unofficially for a while. And I was 50-50 on it, a little bit concerned. However, I like what Mr. Wilson and his staff put in it with this being stringent parts of it. So I'm very well okay with it now due to the some of the meat he put in there for not just having it applicant driven, but more staff driven to put the stringent language in there. So I'm more comfortable with that. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? Hearing none, we will go to agenda item 5D. And Mr. Wilson, you get the floor.
Yes, sir. So we have 3 utility extension requests before you. Next slide, please. Actually, this is the only slide, isn't it? Okay. So this one is for just over 10 acres. It's just north of Sequoia Forest Development. They have been slowly building out their single-family home development headed north, and these are the next 2 parcels on that path. The TRC has reviewed a single-family development plan to extend their development for 35 single-family home units. This property is, of course, not in the town limits. No department had any issues with this utility extension request. The property is designated as Tier 1 with our employment center, the future character and land use map. The rezoning for this property would come at a later date. So this is just for utility extension requests, which is before you this month. I'd be happy to answer any questions about this one. I think we may have one more slide for them.
Any?
You can see it's right along Charlotte Highway. Sequoia Forest is to the south. But there is water in the immediate vicinity, so we're not too far away.
Does anyone have any questions or need any more information on this request? Then I guess my question, I'm just want some clarity. When we do water only, what are those rates still standard or double? Just some clarity.
So the rates are doubled until the property is within the corporate limits.
Thank you. Just needed some clarity on that. A lot of times we be looking for water and sewer and bringing them in. So just clarity for everyone. Just update some on the double rate at this time. All right, we thank you. If no other question, we go to 5E. Mr. Wilson.
And once again, this is a utility extension request. Next slide, please. And I should have mentioned with the previous one, we do have all 3 of these applications have submitted annexation applications as well. So we do require that, but just wanted to make sure that it's clear that all 3 of these utility extension requests have filled out all their annexation application paperwork and are in the queue for our next round of annexations. But this is a single family home property. It's just over half an acre. It has an existing home on it. Their well is drying up. This is a water only request. Again, no department had any issues with this extension request. This is in the tier two, and if you could just see the next slide, please. This is in the tier 2 growth area for the town. You can see it there on your screen. It's immediately adjacent to tier 1, and there's a water line right across the street from it. Or actually it looks like on the same side of the street as it. So it is in the future land use as neighborhood residential. Happy to answer any questions about this one.
Any question? Any concerns? Any more information we need? Hearing none, we go to our next item, S5F. Mr. Wilson.
There. And again, this is another water only request. Next slide, please. It's on Waterland Road between 115 and 21. This property is 0.4 acres. And again, this is an emergency water connection request that the town manager did approve last month. No issues with any department. This is in the tier 1. You could just go to the next slide, please. This is in the tier 1 part of the town's growth and utilities area, and is also in the neighborhood residential future land use. I could answer any questions about this one.
Any questions? Any more information? Any concerns? Thank you, Mr. Wilson. We'll move on. We'll move to our next agenda item, which would be 5G, and we'll call on Mr. Young.
Good morning.
Morning.
I know Danny is ready for a break, so.
Yeah.
So this is our professional services contract. Jen, do we have a couple of slides on this? Thank you, ma'am. So remember at the last board meeting, we had 2 agreements that were approved. The first one was the FHWA USDOT, if you want to call it that, build agreement, which allows us to get the money. So we have $13.7 million. You remember we were awarded that back in November of last year. Those agreements are actually still in process. Just kind of let you know what's going on with them. We're still awaiting the one from FHWA. Still looking to get it any day. In communication with those folks, and hopefully I talked to them yesterday. Hopefully I'll get that soon. But the next parts of that were the NCDOT agreement, with the master agreement, and then town staff at the time. Obviously, we were working to get a consultant on board. We did go through what's called an RFLOI process, which is request for letters of interest. Essentially like an RFQ or request for qualifications, except for you're going to pick the firm. It's much like our design build process, if anybody remembers that. And so the firms come in, they interview. We did interview 3 firms. RK&K, which is out of Charlotte, was picked to be our firm. So they have they submitted a proposal, which is what we're looking at tonight, or we are going to be looking at on Monday night, obviously. But anyway, it'll be for the full design and right away. We did have to end up including a couple of other items that were not anticipated once we had conversations with Norfolk Southern and of course with NCDOT. For example, we do have to include plans for the closures of the 2 roads in town and the 3 private developments. I'll remind you of those roads for Walnut Street, Taba Avenue. So that has to be part of this system. So once East West Connector is up and running and functioning, you have traffic moving on it. You have to close those 2 down. So that has to be included as part of this plan, and then just a couple other ancillary items related to the railroad things that were added as well. But either way, this is a lump sum. Portion of it is a lump sum contract for design, and then the second portion is actually a cost plus payment on right of way for the sub that's working with RK&K, which is actually PPS, Professional Property Services, Craig Long. But that is making the cost plus is making some assumptions that there are, I can't remember, 20 right of ways that have to be purchased. So really won't know that until design comes into play. So a lot of these items right here are making some assumptions that things are going to hit. But roughly looking at about a $1.7 million contract tonight. And of course, it's going to on Monday night. There was go along with that. We're borrowing money from the GeoBond 2019 GeoBonds, I believe, to pay for the difference between the budgeted money. We are working with our folks out there that part of our process. We're doing our grant along that corridor. Met with them last week. They're still on board as far as we know. Staff and town attorney are working on an agreement right now. So hopefully we'll have something in place and get those guys right away in place and some hard codified information for right away, and of course their promised funds as well. With that, I'll take any questions, comments.
Any question for Mr. Young? Just follow up, Young, is what were the 3 crossings you said were gonna have to be closed when this come into effect?
So there's actually 2 public crossings. Walnut Street on the north end of town, I believe, is one of them. And Top Avenue, just in front of the library. I believe that's the 2 that the board decided on. The 3 other ones are actually private crossings that are just along this corridor. So that map you're seeing on the right-hand side, within that corridor, there's actually 3 existing private crossings that will be part of that closure agreement as well.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else needing more information or have any other questions for John? Well, hearing none, Mr. Young, we thank you. We'll go to our next agenda item, 5H, Ms. Allison Kraft, awarding of contract for mobile pump station.
In the wet wells. Basically, it's pressure washing, cleaning and relining the wet well at 2 pump stations and doing a little bit of metal work, and then also installing a automatic bar screen at the South Iredell lift station. And I can answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Ms. Kraft? Hearing none, we thank you, Ms. Allison. And next will be our 5I, which we will have Ms. Deborah Hockett, a reimbursement resolution, fleet managers project.
Mine actually has 3 parts to it. The first is to approve the reimbursement resolution, because we will be borrowing money from the general fund to be replaced when we issue the limited obligation safety bonds that we hope to sell in December. The second part will be an amendment to transfer the funds from the general fund to the project ordinance. And then the third part will be to approve the project ordinance so that we can approve or award the contract in 5J, the next agenda item. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Is there any question for Ms. Hockett on this item 5I? Well, thank you, Ms. Hockett. I hear none. So we will go to our next item, which would be 5J, which we call on Mr. Wyckoff.
Yes, so this is the award of contracts to Encompass Building Group for the construction of the fleet maintenance expansion project. And as Deborah said, it relates to the bonds, and we're requesting to pay ourselves back with it. Do we have some slides with this, please? You go to the next slide, please. The board is fairly well versed in the expansion needs here for this project. This is the site plan you're seeing as the project was bid. The preliminary sketches for this go back to 2017 and 18, and it resulted in a design RFQ in 2019, and we awarded the design contract to Adams and Associates, and we designed the project last year fully. And the project was sent for permit in March of last year, and we opened bids for this project in June of 2020. The project here you can see in the site plan was bid as a base bid, which included the expansion of the heavy duty bay and the new parking lot that faces 21. The first alternate was the additional small engine bay, which is on the north side of the building, and a expansion of the light duty bay, which is on the west side of the building. Those areas are shown in gray on this drawing. We're requesting to award the contract for the base bid, which is the heavy duty bay in the parking lot, and alternate one, which is the small engine repair bay on the north side of the building. When we tabulate that, the low bidder is Encompass Building at $1,820,500. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is a further breakdown of the project components. We're talking about expanding the heavy duty bay here, which is shown on the isometric drawing. That red area is the back side of the building from the north side. That is the heavy duty bay, and we'll be adding an additional 2,200 square feet on the back of that. And the biggest reason that we need to expand that is so we can work on multiple pieces of heavy duty equipment at once. If there's any kind of delay and a piece of equipment needs to sit right now, that's not possible. Additionally is the 1,080 square feet on the rear of the building, which is the small engine. And you're looking at below the isometric drawing is an elevation drawing of what the new building would look like from the east side. So you can see where the new heavy duty bay would expand to, and then the whole new bay in maroon there would be the small engine repair, which the town hired a small engine repair mechanic, and this is to facilitate his needs. The town took occupancy of the building in 2011. And the town obviously has grown, and as the fleet needs has grown, we're doing almost 2,800 work orders a year on pieces of equipment, and those pieces of equipment, including the small engine, are about 1,340 assets that they maintain in this facility. So that's really that demand driving this. In addition is the 18 more parking spaces out front. As any of you have been to a meeting here, an event or function at the Ops Center, you'll know that parking has gotten tighter and tighter as the town has grown. The amount of employees at the facilities has grown as well. We go to the next slide, please. So again, to recap, what we're asking is that we award the contract for the base bid in alternate one. And you can see the spaces here of A and B. The 18 additional parking spaces along Highway 21, which was shown in the original site plan there. The low bidder was Encompass Building Group. It would be a 360-day construction. It would be initially funded through the general fund and reimbursed by the bond if approved. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Wyckoff? Well, I just throw a punchline out. Are you gonna put air conditioners in that work bay?
I think actually there will be some large fan apparatus in the ceiling that'll move the air. There'll be plenty of air, it just won't be conditioned.
Okay, I just wondering why we got this nice building with no air. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments or concerns? Anyone have anything they'd like to talk? See any more information on? Hear none. See, we think we'll go to our next thing on our agenda would be manager report. I don't know if Randy would like to say anything at this time before we close out.
No, sir. We'll have a manager's report. We're working on it right now. One thing that I'm going to include in the manager's report is one of the videos that was recently done, and I think it may have even been in Friday Noteworthy. Just a reminder that when you get, as a commissioner, if you get a call for a water sewer issue, that we do have people on call, and we'll pass along that information so that, all hours of the night, we can respond to those calls. That is the PSA that we'll be including in the manager's report, because we still get that too here at Town Hall, that people will call me or somebody else, and we direct them to that that on-call service. So I'll show that video as part of it and talk a little bit about that.
All right, thank you, sir. And is there any new business that we want to put on for Monday night? Anyone have any new business? Hearing none, then we will have our closed session, going to consult with attorney, economic development and personnel in our closed session. And I don't know if any of the staff members or anyone have anything they'd like to comment before we close out, and have a great weekend. Well, hearing none, I guess we'll close our session and go to Shop and Save and get a steak.